Andrew, it's nice to visit with you. Thanks for making time for us.
Man, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, and I asked you before the show how do people refer to you as, because we've had on senators and congressmen, and that's pretty easy, but attorney general is a mouthful. You said it's Andrew's fine.
Yeah, man. Look, I was only a captain in the Army. I feel like general's a little too much. But yeah, that's the title. I'm just Andrew, though.
Okay, cool. So how are things in Missouri?
We are good. We've been fighting and winning here in Missouri since I took office on so many different issues that I think are important. At the end of the day, it's about protecting freedom, safety, and prosperity. And if we don't have folks in office that are willing to fight for those things, we're going to lose them. And I'm really
Mhm.
proud of the work we've done at the Missouri Attorney General's office to support those principles.
And what important elections are coming up for your state in November? Because for me, it's like we've got to get Senator Cruz reelected,
Yeah.
or we're screwed.
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
can't afford to lose that seat.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the balance of the Senate, the power in the Senate hangs in the balance, and certainly Texas is a critical state, and Senator Cruz's seat's a critical state. Same is true with United States Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri. We feel confident Josh has put together, Senator Hawley's put together just a fantastic record of fighting for the working people of the state of Missouri, hammering conservative issues, holding wrongdoers accountable, and certainly holding the Biden and Harris administration's failures, exposing those for what they are and holding them accountable as
They
well.
have failures.
Yeah, I don't know of any successes. So, like, the whole 4 years has been such a train wreck disaster of Biden Harris. I think it's funny that Harris is like running from the sinking ship of the Biden administration, trying to distance herself from it. It's like she was in the room, she was making all
Yeah.
those decisions, she owns all those problems. But
Hmm.
so there's some real stark contrast between people like that and people like Senator Cruz and Senator Hawley, who have done so much to protect the American people.
Right. Right. Yeah. They in the media does a great job too, because I mean, like one of the first things that I remember uh, Kamala being named was border czar, and
That's
now if
right.
you watch TV, it's like she was never border czar. I'm like, there's that one famous clip where she was being interviewed, and the guy's like, "But you've never been to the border," and she's like, "Well, I've never been to Europe either." I was just like, "Okay,
Yeah,
but you're
but
the
you're not
border
the
czar."
European czar. You are the border czar. Like going to
Yeah.
Europe's not part of her core responsibility. She was assigned responsibility for securing the southern border and utterly failed to do it. In fact, did the
Yeah.
opposite by hanging a green light at the southern border and perverting the law to allow people in that Congress had never authorized. I mean, it's absolutely insanity.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah, I mean, as a native Texan, some of my buddies have leases where they they're afraid to take their families now in South Texas. One of
Yeah.
them found a dead guy on his place, and the guy. I mean, and here's the thing: I don't blame the people for coming. I want to be very clear. Like, I would maybe do the same thing, but it still doesn't make it legal. So
Yeah.
we have a process. You go through the process, or if you get picked up, you should get deported. It's that easy.
It's absolutely that easy. And look, it's making every state a border state. I mean, we've seen some of the harms in the state of Texas that have occurred from the illegal crossings. We're seeing it in Missouri. We've had more than 1,100 incidences of reported human trafficking. How many go unreported,
Mm.
underinvestigated, unprosecuted? We've had more than 1,500 deaths in one, and these are all from 1 year alone. 1,500 deaths from fentanyl exposure. That fentanyl's coming across the southern border. So like this idea that we're helping people by letting them break the law is incorrect. We're creating a humanitarian crisis by not simply enforcing the laws that are on the books at the southern border. And we know there's a system that works because President Trump reduced illegal border crossings by
Mm-hmm.
more than 90% with effective policies like remain in Mexico, detain and deport. Those policies were build a wall. Some basic policy scenarios that absolutely worked that the Biden Harris administration not only rejected but reversed and went in the opposite direction. And that's why we're seeing these harms.
Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong. So the stats I've seen financially are the border wall was going to cost like $5 billion. We're spending $450 billion annually now on this immigrant crisis.
Oh, I think, yeah, at least if that may be an underestimation. That's why Missouri and Texas teamed up to file the lawsuit to force the Biden administration to finish building the border wall. And we won that lawsuit. And it's important to remember that Congress passes laws and has the power of the person. So in 2020, Congress had appropriated money with the explicit commandment to erect new border barrier systems. Well, when Biden took office, within a few weeks, he signed an executive order saying walls don't work, we're not going to use them. And Kamala Harris agreed with him, despite the fact that Joe Biden, as a United States senator, had voted for the Secure Fence Act. And so they undermined the will of Congress and Congress's lawmaking and appropriations authority by refusing to execute the laws as written. Missouri and Texas teamed up, filed suit, and proud to deliver a win on that issue.
Yeah, I remember Biden sold a bunch of this stuff that was already, like, the materials already been purchased. They're just sitting there on the border, and he just sold it off for pennies on the dollar.
Wasting your and my tax dollars and making our country less safe.
Yeah, yeah. So there are a few pressing things that need to be addressed here today. Let's start with Kamala on guns. Is she the most radical nominee we've ever seen? And I use nominee, I use that term loosely because she wasn't nominated at all.
No.
She was appointed.
The anointed one, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, I think she is. I mean, she was an attorney from California. I mean, the legal profession is inherently left leaning. I mean, we all know that. But boy, you get an attorney from California, and you've got like this incubator for radical, woke, progressive ideology. And she has espoused that throughout her career. And again, I can't really point to any successes. Like, what has she done and done well? She's had this lifetime in government employment where she's bounced from job to job, screwing things up. And that certainly has been true with her part in the Biden-Harris administration. And so, yeah, I mean, look, I think she's got some real questions to answer. We know that the Second Amendment is intended, first of all, the rights come from God, not man. They're codified in the Constitution. The Constitution exists to protect us from the government. And when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms, what the Constitution says is that right shall not be infringed, period. Every single time we start talking about gun control, my question is, well, isn't that an infringement? And what I see are new fronts in the war to protect our Second Amendment rights that are opening. We have to protect our right to access accessories. We have to protect our right to be able to afford ammunition. And again, Missouri has led on those two issues and has fought back on those two issues. Those things will be under attack if Kamala Harris is elected in November. Make no mistake about it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Newsom just did it in California. Now there's a tax on ammunition, which is already taxed by the Pittman-Robertson Fund. Like,
yeah,
that's like you're taxed twice now.
Well, and what we saw was several months ago, Letitia James in the state of New York led a coalition of blue state attorney generals who demanded that the Biden-Harris administration cease their contract with Olin Winchester at the Lake City ammo plant in the state of Missouri. And so this is a Department of Defense ammo plant that makes 5.56 ammunition. And they make bullets for the Department of Defense. And when they're not making bullets for the Department of Defense, they make civilian bullets that are slightly different, but that fills the demand in the marketplace. That supply fills the demand that we create in the marketplace. And so what Letitia James wanted to do was eliminate that source of civilian sales into the marketplace, jack up the price of 5.56 ammo so that you, me, and your audience wouldn't be able to afford it. That's a market manipulation. And Missouri led the effort to fight back, sent a cease and desist letter, and got Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to stand down to protect not only working Missouri families at that Lake City ammo plant, but our right to access ammunition.
Yeah, yeah. Well, she famously was put in her place by Joe Biden at I think it was in 2019 at Democrat debate. They had all the nominees or contestants, whatever you want to call them, on stage, and she was talking about using executive order on gun control. And Biden said, "Kamala, we have this thing called a Constitution." And her response to that was, "Joe, we just need to say yes, we can." Okay, fast forward to well, it was like the week after she was appointed the Democratic nominee, and she said she would give, this is a clip, anyone can go look it up. She said she would give Congress 90 days to act if elected, and then she would use executive order to ban ARs and I don't know what else. How would that play out if she was elected and tried to use executive order to implement an AR ban?
Well, it's absolutely illegal and unconstitutional. Congress makes laws, not the president. And Congress can't pass laws that infringe our right to keep and bear arms. And again, it's not about, the Second Amendment was never about outdoor shooting and sportsmen and hunting. It protects those things too, but it was always about an individual's right to defend themselves, their families, their property from other people and from the government. And so ARs are essential to that freedom. And again, when we start talking about things like that, it's not only important to remember that the Second Amendment matters and shall not be infringed, but also the structure of our government matters. Our founding fathers understood that we needed a federal government of limited authority. And that authority at the federal level would be diffused over three co-equal branches of government in order to maximize liberty. And that's why you have the separation of powers in the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. And what Kamala Harris is proposing to do there is to say, well, Congress, you should pass a law, and if you don't, I'll do it for you. Well, then she'll be violating her oath to protect and defend the Constitution, and at that point should be impeached.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, Biden's done that for 4 years as far as the border hasn't been impeached. So, maybe it seems like conservatives are the only ones getting impeached these days. So
yeah, lawfare only works one way, and it's if you have an it's targeted if you have an R next to your name. But you're right, and I was proud to testify in Congress in the impeachment proceedings against Secretary Mayorkas, who I do feel has willfully violated his oath of office to enforce the laws of the nation, even the laws he disagrees with. He doesn't get to cherry pick. He doesn't get to veto. Only the president can do that. And once those laws become effective, the ability to veto has passed. And so, yeah, when you've got these federal officials refusing to do their jobs, it's up to the voters to hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and then you have Biden suing Governor Abbott because he's actually trying to secure the border. And he's like, wait. We need it more open. So we're going to sue you now because we don't like razor wire or any of this other stuff you're doing because you're having to do the job that we're refusing to do. So it's absolutely insane. One of the most ignorant retorts I hear from leftists, though, is that they all say they want to ban ARs and none of them have done it yet. Well, if you gave them control of Congress and the Senate, they would do it.
Yeah. Yeah, they would absolutely do it. Again, it would be illegal, unconstitutional in states like Missouri and Texas. I'm sure would file suit to fight back and would ultimately win in the court system. But how dare we, have public officials who are so brazen about violating our constitutional rights? Again, the rights in the Constitution come from God, not man. And the Constitution exists to protect us from the government. And the government exists to protect our rights. And so that's why people like you, me, and your audience are always so offended when we see government officials that are so eager to trample on our rights in perversion of the very purpose for which we have a government.
Yeah. Well, and I guess it would require them, using the filibuster. And so far, everyone's saying, well, we're not doing that, but I don't know. I wouldn't put it past them. Do you think Trump made a miscalculation with the bump stock ban? It was a reaction to, I think, the Vegas shooting, if I remember right. It was a reaction to something.
Yeah.
And I've had on Congressman Andrew Clyde, who's worked feverishly to try to get, that misstep, I think, overturned. But what is your thought on that?
Well, I'm excited that the court has reversed that decision and restored our right to access bump stocks. I think the same thing is true with pistol braces. When the Biden-Harris administration tried to pass a rule that would ban pistol braces, and states like Missouri filed suit and ultimately won that lawsuit. Article 1, Section 23 of the Missouri Constitution says that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and that the state has a legal and moral obligation to defend that right, but it extends beyond just firearms. It explicitly says firearms and accessories as well. And so when I get pushback, well, why are you filing these lawsuits? Like, our Constitution creates a legal and moral obligation, and it's my sacred duty to fulfill that obligation to protect not only the guns, but also the accessories and the ammunition.
Mm-hmm. This latest school shooting outside of Atlanta, once again, a horrible tragedy. It seems to me, and people you have these debates with people, and it's like, well, how would you fix the problem? Well, it's like, okay, well, mental health is clearly broken. I would say when we had God in schools, like we didn't have this. Then, but what about separation in state? You can't say you're a constitutionalist if you want prayer in schools. And I'm like, okay, well, you asked me, how do we fix it?
Yeah.
And, okay, you don't want God in schools. I get it. So let's make fathers great again.
Yeah.
Let's bring dads back.
Yeah.
Maybe somehow get God back in society, because when those things were present, and that goes across, that's African American and Caucasian, right? We didn't have these school shootings.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing.
Well, a couple of thoughts there. Number one, good guys with guns stop bad guys with guns. It is you can't make it any more clear or simple than that. 100% of the time, that is true. Good guys with guns stop bad guys with guns. But let me say too, when you're talking about God in schools, if you read the text of the First Amendment, it says that Congress shall pass no law affecting the establishment of a religion. What the founding fathers intended by passage of and adoption of the First Amendment was that it would limit Congress's authority to regulate religion. It doesn't mean that we can't have a Bible in school or prayer time in school or God in schools. God was never, it was never intended to drive Christianity from public discourse or from the public square. It was intended to limit congressional authority, and no subsequent adoption of any subsequent amendment has changed that. And so I think the court has misinterpreted the anti-establishment clause, which is really just a limitation on Congress, and has created this weird jurisprudence where now they're like picking, calling balls and strikes, where the Ten Commandments in a Texas in front of the Texas State House is okay, but hanging in the Kentucky courtroom is not okay. I mean, again, it's so scattershot and irreconcilable and unprincipled that I think we need to go back to the plain text and original understanding and the history and tradition behind the First Amendment. And I think that helps restore constitutional order.
Yeah. Well, and I think the state of Louisiana is putting the Ten Commandments back in their public school system.
As well they should.
Which to me seems like a states' right thing anyway. So
yeah. And again, let's talk about the 10th Amendment. That amendment still matters too. It gets forgotten too often, but it says that any authority not given to the federal government or denied to the states is enjoyed by the states and the people of the states. So states like Louisiana, Texas, and Missouri absolutely have the right to do that if they so desire.
Well, going back to that, the money that I referenced as far as what we're spending on illegals. So they're like, we don't want God in schools. Okay. We're not going to make fathers great again. That ship has sailed. Okay. Well, then why don't we take that money that we're spending on illegals or any other gross misappropriation of funding the government is actively participating in? Why don't we put more armed security guards in front of schools? There's your answer.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, that seems like the most, like, maybe we could put American kids first.
Yeah.
Protect them.
Good guys with guns, stop bad guys with guns.
Yeah. Do you think that there is a conversation to be had on gun restrictions ever?
Conversation on gun restrictions?
Yeah, like, should we ever? And I'll tell you. So I'll give you an example. When I was a younger man, I've been doing this full time 15 years. There was a school shooting, and I was like, maybe we should just make it 21. The kid that shot everyone was 18. Boy, did I not understand my listening base. I got more negative feedback for that comment than ever, and I quickly realized, no, there's no coming to the altar and passing the olive branch on this issue, because if you give them an inch, they're never going to be satisfied.
No, not until they've confiscated our guns and sent to a re-education camp anyone that ever owned a gun. As a kid, I remember watching the original movie Red Dawn, and when the Soviets invade and the Cuban commander goes to the gun store and orders that the records of all gun sales be seized and that anyone who has purchased the gun be rounded up. I mean, that is what gun confiscation looks like in my mind. I think that was a very accurate portrayal of what would ever happen if the left is given full control. And you're right. I mean, look, the Second Amendment says the right shall not be infringed. I think all too often we're scared of freedom, or at least the left is scared of freedom. But again, the left wants more victims. The right celebrates heroes. We want statues of our heroes, and the left wants to denigrate and tear down those statues and create more victims. Whereas we're not afraid of freedom. We understand that it's an irreducible axiomatic principle that you have a right, but a corresponding responsibility. I have a right to keep and bear arms. I have a responsibility not to keep my .357 Magnum, within arm's reach of my 2-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, I have the right to vote. I have a responsibility to get up off the couch and go to the polling place on election day and cast the ballot and be informed about the candidates I'm voting for. I have the right to free speech. We have these rights, but there are corresponding responsibilities that go with them. And the left wants to ignore the responsibilities and focus on how scary the right is. And I, for one, am not going to be shamed into being afraid of freedom.
Absolutely. And I think for far too long, conservatives have just been too polite. Like, I'm not going to, I don't want to say lower myself to their level, but the gloves are off. Like, we're in the fight of our lives with this election. I truly do believe that freedom is under attack. Let's talk about censorship. And I've been a victim of this. I mean, unequivocally, nonstop, shadow banned on Instagram. And I'll give you statistics to support it. So probably maybe around August of 2020, we have the election cycle coming. I'm posting pro-America, pro-gun, pro-Trump. And I I don't want to say I like Trump. He has no politician's perfect, right? But everyone's like thinks that we've turned Trump into this god, and I'm like, I was a conservative before Trump. I will be a conservative after Trump. Trump's just the guy right now, and he's doing a damn good job. But anyway, Instagram starts flagging my stuff. I notice where my page was growing 5, 7, 10% a month, it just stopped growing. And nobody's seeing my stuff except for people that already follow me. And I had 145,000 followers in November of 2020. Today I have 162. So 17,000 in 4 years, where the page was like, you could just watch the meter and it was just like flying. And I was like, life's good. This is great. And then they shut it down. And then one time, it was December 2022, my page is just deleted, gone, no explanation. Don't get it back for a month. Luckily, someone told me if you have over 100,000 followers, you're not going to lose your page. And I had an advertiser that spends a lot of money with Meta that actually got it back for me. But there was no recourse. There was no one for me to talk to. No one. There wasn't a help desk. It was just like, sorry, if I didn't have those advertisers, I would probably not ever have gotten my page back. So the censorship is real.
Yeah.
And I want to get your thoughts on that, and then I want to play a clip from this week from Kamala to support it.
Yeah, look, we know that so much of that censorship was done at the government's demand under the Biden-Harris administration. We've uncovered that in our lawsuit, Missouri v. Biden, that went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And the court explicitly found that the government was demanding censorship of American voices. 100% of those voices were conservative voices, and in violation of the First Amendment. They sent us back down to the trial court to see if there's evidence of censorship that goes beyond the year 2021. And we're confident we're going to find it. We're firing off discovery demands now to root out the vast censorship enterprise, to put an end to it. We've got to build a wall of separation between tech and state to protect our First Amendment right to free speech. The whole idea behind the First Amendment is that there's competition of ideas, this free, fair, and open marketplace of ideas, where the best ideas will compete and win. The remedy for disfavored speech in this country has always been counter speech, not government censorship. And yet the left has rejected that. They can't win the arguments on the merits, so they have to silence you and me. But what they're forgetting is that the First Amendment protects not only the speaker's right to say, but the listener's rights to hear. And I submit to you that the censorship that's going on in this country today is worse than at any point in human history. When King George shut down a printing press, the whole world knew he had done it. It was done in the light of day, and was only silencing the written word, one medium of communication. But when you or your colleagues are shadow banned, de-emphasized, deplatformed, it's a clandestine censorship that we don't always know or understand, because you've got big tech oligarchs that are turning dials behind the scenes, in these shadowy algorithms to silence or squelch your voice or my ability to hear from you. Moreover, the speech, the mediums of communication that are being silenced are not just one form. It's a multi-dimensional form of communication. It's the written word, it's the spoken word, it's body language, it's imagery. And so this is really a dangerous time in United States history when it comes to whether or not we have the right to free speech. And if we don't stand up and fight to protect it, we will lose it. The big tech oligarchs out of Silicon Valley want to fundamentally change our culture forever by driving our voices from public discourse. I think they don't do that with our consent. And if we're not aware of it and fighting back against it, we will lose ground in this fight. And I think it's high time we struck back.
Yeah. And like Mark Zuckerberg sent a letter to Jim Jordan it was like 2 weeks ago, admitting that the Biden administration repeatedly flexed on them, saying censor this, censor this. That's wild corruption. The level of the depth of that corruption, trying to mislead the American people, to me, that's impeachable right there. It's mind blowing.
We have a First Amendment for a reason. You know what I mean? Like that is incredibly violative of the First Amendment. It interfered with the 2020 election. There's no doubt about it.
Hunter Biden's laptop suppressed it.
That's right. The evidence clearly establishes the deep state suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story. Big tech went in succumbed to the demands of the federal government and suppressed that story. And we know that polling suggests that the majority of Americans would have liked to have had that information as they went to the polling place.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. It's cost me a lot of money. Now, I would have, let's just say maybe I'd have 400,000 followers by now. Like, just the way it was growing, probably somewhere in there, maybe more. That's a lot of ad revenue. And there's tons of other people like me. Not so many in the hunting space because for some reason outdoorsmen are afraid to talk about politics by and large, which seems absurd, but maybe they're worried about their bottom line. I sleep pretty well at night, even though it's cost me money. But I did want to play this clip from our vice president here. This was from this week, and this will tell you that she's not done. They're not done. So why anyone would think this is acceptable is mind blowing to me.
The Department of Justice of the United States back in the business of justice. We will double the Civil Rights Division and direct law enforcement to counter this extremism. We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy. And if you profit off of hate, if you act as a megaphone for misinformation or cyber warfare, if you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable as a community.
What do you think of that?
I think it's illegal. I think that's the exact kind of coercion that led to the censorship regime's development in the first place. We know it's still there. She's going to add fuel to that fire and make it worse. At the end of the day, she hates the First Amendment. She thinks that she gets to determine what is and isn't true and will tell the rest of it. That's not how that works. The government doesn't get to tell us what's true. We get to figure that out for ourselves through free, fair, and open debate protected by the First Amendment.
Yeah, that's, to me, when I hear that, that's the scariest thing is, so you want to weaponize the DOJ, which you're already doing against Trump, but you want to weaponize it against the citizenship, and you get to determine what is misinformation and what isn't.
Yeah.
So I say, that's a boy, he has a penis. That's a girl, she has a vagina. Oh, hate speech. You're deplatformed. Maybe you're going to face legal ramifications. I mean, they're doing it in Europe. People were like, that's so far-fetched, that would never happen. I'm like, look at what's going on in Europe, in Australia, in Canada. You misgender someone, hate speech.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, at the end of the day, America's supposed to be different. We're supposed to enjoy freedom and the freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, freedom, right to keep and bear arms are all central to that. They're in the First and Second Amendments to the United States Constitution for a reason. They still matter to people like you and me and your audience. And like you said, if we don't have warriors willing to fight for those things, we will lose them. And this is a critical election. Everybody says, oh, well, this election's the most critical one in history. Well, I think this time it's true. And here's what scares me. If you look across the United States of America, the number of firearms owners who, hunters, anglers who don't vote, it is astonishing. Like, if we all registered to vote and took a battle buddy with us, took a hunting or fishing buddy, a shooting buddy with us to the polling place, we would dominate every election. We just have to show up and fight and win on one day. And that's why I always tell folks, go to voteforamerica.org, vote number 4america.org. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go one step further. Get one of your friends, one of your shooting buddies, make sure they're registered to vote, and then take them to the polling place and make sure they vote, make sure our voices are heard. And this thing, we can make it too big to rig and we will win.
I 100% agree. And hunters and a lot of times gun owners are they're apathetic to this because they just want to live. And really, they're the ones that want to live and let live. Like, I don't really care what you're doing. I'm over here in my, back 40, just shooting my guns. Leave me alone. We don't want to take the time to go vote because we don't. Who would have ever thought we'd be facing these things? But we are. And so it's never been more paramount to get your butt to the poll. Like you said, take a buddy, vote for America. And you can also follow along on their social if you want to see more stuff like these. Every day, Kamala says something that is pretty unconstitutional. You can find it there. If you need evidence, it's all over the internet.
Yeah.
So it's crucial. Thanks for all of the great work that you are doing in Missouri and in America. Thanks for your service as well. Certainly appreciate that. And thanks for the time today.
Hey, man, appreciate you. Appreciate your audience. We got an important election here in Missouri as well. I would, encourage folks to go check out baileymo.com. We can always use help to make sure we win this election in November. Any support folks can give me helps me get this thing across the finish line and keep fighting and winning for Missourians, but for all Americans. I always tell folks, like, hey, you may not be a constituent, but I can still represent you. these lawsuits against the federal government and against these unconstitutional acts, they matter to all Americans. And so we'll keep fighting and winning with folks' help.
Yeah, so maybe you should have mentioned that you were running for re-election too.
Yeah, that's right.
You at the very beginning.
Hey, look, man, I want to make this about the issues and about the stuff your audience, is important to them. But yeah, we're up for election here in about 60 days. And we need all the help we can get. And so, yeah, I encourage everyone I talk to, go check out baileymo.com, baileymo.com. If you can support us, it means the world to us. We need more ammunition to keep fighting the enemies. Again, we've got I put together a demonstrated record of fighting and winning for Missourians and for all Americans who like freedom, safety, and prosperity. And we need to keep doing that, especially in these frightening times.
Yeah. Well, we certainly appreciate your effort, and we need it more than ever. So thank you very much. God bless, and have a good one.
Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too.